There you go.
Now you should have the main screen. All right. Hello everyone and good evening, and thank you to the Sustainable Sharon Coalition for hosting this webinar this evening and doing an incredible job spreading the word on this essential topic. Thanks especially to Cheryl, who you just met, and to Paul, who orchestrated the whole thing for tonight. Paul will be feeding me questions from the chat function, so please put your questions in. There'll be 4 breaks during the presentation. There's 4 main sections: one on heat pumps, one on insulation, one on triple glazed windows, and one on solar panels. And after each one, I'll take a break. We'll take a couple of questions. I won't take more than that because I want to keep us on time, make sure we end on time today. And then at the end, we'll open up for live questions, and you can ask whatever you want. And I'll stay on as long as people want to ask questions until the last person's questions get answered. So the record for that is 3 hours. I hope it won't take 3 hours tonight, but my belief is the most important part of this webinar is your questions. And my goal is to help people cut their carbon footprint, and that no one's going to cut their carbon footprint if they have concerns about what it is they're about to do. So that's why I stay on as long as possible to answer everyone's questions. So I'm going to be speaking this evening mostly about our own experience cutting our home's carbon footprint to 0 and making a 15% return on investment by doing so. That's right, you heard me correctly. You now get paid to cut your carbon footprint. This is a sea change. This is a radical change from even 10 years ago when it cost you a lot of money to cut your carbon footprint. Now the opposite is true. You now get paid to cut your carbon footprint. This is disruptive in the language of business. It's the inflection point, and we're entering a new era, and this is the point of no return. Welcome to the future, everyone. It's a zero carbon future. Now, as Cheryl mentioned, everyone's going to be muted to start with, and then we'll do the Q&A at the breaks. At the end, we'll do the live questions. And we are recording the webinar so we can host it on the Sustainable Sharon website, and so people who couldn't be here tonight can see it in the future. So this is what happened on our house. You can see the carbon footprint is about 30 to 35 tons in the early years. Then at the end of 2016, we added solar panels on the roof of our house and heat pumps to replace our ancient and falling apart air conditioning units. And that cut off carbon footprint in 2017 by about 2/3, by about 20 tons of carbon dioxide, from 35 tons or so to about 10 tons or so. Then at the end of 2017, I added insulation. I did this myself. I didn't pay a contractor to do this. I just added the insulation myself on the ceiling of our basement, and we added triple glazed windows to replace our ancient and falling apart double glazed windows from the 1970s that were original to the house, and they were falling apart. I'll show you pictures a little later on, but there was literally a 1-inch gap between the window and the frame, and that was just covered over with duct tape. So our windows had to be replaced, and rather than replace them with double glazed, we replaced them with triple glazed. That's 3 panes of glass, and that combination of the triple glazed windows and the insulation cut our carbon footprint a further 50%, another 5 tons, making it about 5 tons. And then I thought that was kind of cool that we'd got that far, to be honest. I didn't really expect when I set out to do this. I just set out to cut our carbon footprint. I did not set out thinking I could go 0. That was a surprise. So when we got to 5 tons, I thought, well, maybe I can just push this a little bit further, and maybe we could actually get to 0, and wouldn't that be kind of cool? So we did, and we added an additional solar panel array on the roof of our garage in the middle of 2018, and that cut our carbon footprint for the calendar year of 2019 to 0, in fact, slightly negative, because we're now producing more solar power than we're using, and we're exporting that excess to the grid. And when we do so, that pushes a carbon-based power station off the grid, and so the grid becomes greener as a result, so has a negative carbon footprint. So 35 tons per year is just to put that in context, that's roughly the equivalent of taking 10 gasoline vehicles off the road. So 1 house, 10 cars. This is huge. And when you cut your carbon emissions, of course, you also cut emissions of sulfur dioxide, nitric oxide, pollutants like particulates like PM 2.5, all of which cause asthma. And this is important. We found out in the UK. I'm British if you couldn't tell, but in the UK, 2 million people who have conditions like asthma experience reduced reduced breathing difficulties during the COVID lockdown, when, of course, burning of fossil fuels dropped dramatically for a month or so, about a year ago in March. And that is when these people experience better lung function. There's 2 million people improved lung function because of not burning, albeit temporarily not burning, but not burning fossil fuels. Now, what was even more of a surprise than getting my home to a zero carbon footprint was that I'm saving $11,000 a year on heating and electricity bills. Now, most of you, if you're anything like me, I did not even know what my heating and electricity bills were with any detail before I dug into it. And when I dug into it, I was kind of horrified at how much I was spending, how much our family was spending on heating and electricity. And this is just for the house. It doesn't count, we have a swimming pool. It did not count the swimming pool. That was more on top. And then the cars were more on top of that again. So we were spending about $11,000 or $11,500 a year in the early years. Then it was cut following the carbon footprint in 2017 with the heat pumps and the solar panels, and in 2018 with the insulation and triple glazed windows, and then the additional solar panel array on the roof of my garage in 2018, bringing it to slightly negative for the full year. Now, I'm not sure if Cheryl mentioned this, but I live in Dover. I don't live in Sharon, but I live just sort of next door in Dover. In fact, my kids at Dover Sherburne High School used to go to. I used to drive regularly down to Sharon to take them to sailing on the lake there. And people may be wondering, well, you know, David's got a big house in Dover, and Dover's one of the wealthiest towns in Massachusetts. Is this going to work for me? And the answer is yes. One homeowner who I've been working with is earning a better return on investment, 46% per year, and has cut his carbon footprint 38%. And this man lives alone. He's an elderly gentleman, lives alone in a small house on a small income. This approach works for all houses at all income levels. My approach is based on the laws of physics. Remember, I'm a physicist by training, and the laws of economics. I went to Harvard Business School, so I know that kind of stuff reasonably well. And they're the same for everyone, everywhere. So this is big. This delivers the triple bottom line: people, planet, and profit. Zero pollution for the people, for breathing easier, zero carbon for the planet, and zero bills for you in your back pocket. This webinar will show you how to do it. So just a bit about me. I covered some of this already. I'm British, obviously you can tell by now. I got a degree in physics from Oxford and an MBA from Harvard, and I founded and was CEO of 2 different biotech companies, both of which I took public. And I tell you all of this only to show that I have both the scientific understanding to be able to understand things like the low temperature performance of heat pumps, the low E coatings on triple glazed windows. I actually understand all that stuff. And in addition, I've got the finance experience to be able to say, well, which ones make sense from an economics point of view or from a financial point of view. And what I found when I set out to cut my carbon footprint was there was no guidebook. This kind of surprised me. I thought I'd just go to Amazon, I'd order a guidebook, I'd go to Wellesley Bookstore, I'd go to the local library. I went to all these places. I could not find a guidebook to help me cut my carbon footprint. And so I started going on the web and looking at blogs and websites of vendors and things. And what I found was all the information was sort of, it was biased. It was obviously people trying to sell me stuff without really telling me what the benefits would be. And so I found it all kind of confusing. So I set out to go and do it on my own without a guidebook. And obviously I was successful in doing so. Both my house and my pool now have zero carbon footprints. And I'm saving over $11,000 a year on the house and over $3,000 a year on the pool. I wrote one book about each one: Zero Carbon Home, Zero Carbon Pool. Everyone on this call, by the way, will get the book Zero Carbon Home for free at the end of this webinar. I'll just give you a code. You can download it for free from my website. And I don't work for or get paid for any supplier of equipment or installer. I used to say I'm retired, but now I work sometimes 12 hours a day doing zero carbon stuff. So I can't really say I'm retired anymore, but I'm not working for anyone in the industry, that's for sure. So I have no financial conflict of interest. And this is something that bothered me enormously about all the advice I could get. It was all conflicted because someone was trying to sell me stuff. There was no independent advice, and there's no one who'd done the basic work on economics and finance. How much do I invest? How much do I get back? How much do I save? To actually be able to make rational decisions about what to do and what not to do. And I'll tell you several things throughout this presentation that I decided not to do, even though they're quite popular in the sort of green building or zero carbon community. And all this advice I'm giving tonight is based on my experience, but neither me nor the company I set up is giving any kind of investment or tax or legal or financial advice, nor providing any kind of guarantee of results. Now, tonight, I'm not going to tell you to eat vegetarian. I'm not going to tell you to turn down your thermostat, wear a cardigan to work like Jimmy Carter did, bike to work, have fewer children, or vote for Al Gore. In fact, I don't really care who you vote for. I don't care whether you believe climate change is a Chinese hoax or whether you think it's an existential threat to humanity. I'm just going to talk about how to save money. And I think saving money is something we can all agree on. In fact, I'm not going to really tell you to do anything tonight. I'm just going to show you what we did that worked, and as I mentioned, a few things that didn't work. And it is complete coincidence or perhaps destiny. Our family name really is Green. I'm not making it up, just like I'm not making up anything else in this presentation. So how did we gather this data? How did I gather this data to be so sure of all these conclusions? Well, from our house, basically. Our house is a standard construction, 2x4 walls, with fiberglass in between the wall cavities, with the fiberglass in the attic. Built in 1974, and before we went zero, it had no energy efficiency features whatsoever. It was a pretty energy inefficient house. And we live in Dover, as I mentioned, which has 5,800 heating degree days. The person from California here, if you're in Northern California, you actually have about the same. There's a band that goes across the country from New England through the Midwest, all the way to Northern California, has about 5,800 heating degree days. That's a measure of how cold it gets over the wintertime. And then, of course, Southern California, you've got much fewer heating degree days because it's much warmer down there. And each day, excuse me, for 2 years, I measured the heating oil use in our house and the electricity use. That's, excuse me, this is the kind of super geek I really am. I really actually enjoy this kind of stuff. I enjoy figuring out what the root cause of the problem is and then trying to solve it. And I used that data to build an energy model of our home. And that energy model predicted our energy bills on a daily basis to within 80% accuracy. If any of you are familiar with the statistics, that's an 80% R squared. That's very good for a model like this. I've never really seen models this good on this kind of work. And it produced predicted our full year bills, that's the heating and electricity, to within about 10%. Now that was the original model built in 2016, 2017, something like that. I've refined that and refined that and refined that over the years, and now it's accurate about 5%. And now I used that energy model to basically figure out how much money I could save. Because once I could figure out how much energy I could save by, say, insulating the walls, I could then figure out how much money I could save. And I use that monetary saving just to calculate very simple financial metrics, things like cash flow forecast and net present value, NPV, IRR, or internal rate of return, which is fancy finance speak for return on investment, and the payback period, which is how long it takes for the savings to pay for the investment upfront. And these are totally standard financial calculations. They're taught in every business school. They're certainly taught at Harvard Business School. They're taught in every economics class, every undergraduate finance class. This is completely the way to do financial calculations for investment purposes. And then I measured the cut in the energy use and the dollars for each one of the Fab Four, the heat pumps, the insulation, the triple glazed windows, and the solar panels after I added each one. And I've used a very similar method for our rental property, which I'll show you some pictures of later on, and for consulting clients who've asked me to help them in cutting their carbon footprints. So you may be asking yourself, why now? Why are we having this conversation now? Because the environmental movement have been talking about this, going green, cutting carbon for decades, and yet all of a sudden, it's now possible to cut your carbon footprint and make money by doing so. And it's very, very simple. It's just the technologies have got a lot better. The technologies, all of them, insulation's got a lot better, heat pumps got a lot better, solar panels got a lot cheaper. They've got somewhat better, but really got a lot cheaper. And triple glazed windows, they're all, triple glazed windows today are 8 times better than the ones you put in your house in the 1970s. 8 times. That means they lose 1/8 of the heat that a single glazed window from the 1970s would lose. Huge differences in the technologies. And in addition to the technologies, the subsidies from government, state and federal, are very significant. And so you can, by following these examples, cut the carbon emissions from your home to zero, save thousands of dollars a year on heating and electricity bills, and make a good return on your investment. We have done it. So how do we cut our carbon footprint to zero? We installed the Fab Four: heat pumps, insulation, triple glazed windows, and solar panels. It's easy to remember this because the real Fab Four, that's of course the Beatles, I'm a Brit, I'm sure it shows, had lots of hits: HITS, heat pumps, insulation, triple glazed windows, and solar panels. So it's easy to remember. So how do we go zero and make money? By installing the Fab Four and getting all the tax breaks and subsidies. So I'm going to go through each one of these in turn, heat pumps first, and explain what happened, and then I'll take a couple of questions. So if you've got questions now, or as we go through the heat pump section, just send them in to Paul, and he can read those questions out to me at the end of this section. So this is the results of our heat pumps. This was the single biggest effect on cutting our carbon footprint, cut it almost in half by about 20 tons of carbon dioxide, saving us almost $3,000 a year, an investment of $26,000, paying for itself in about 9 years, and a return on investment of 9%. That's 9% after tax. So if you were to compare this to a taxable investment like the stock market or the bond market, you'd have to earn a lot more than 9%. You'd have to earn maybe 12, 15, or even 18% pre-tax to get the same after-tax return. Very significant. These are very good returns. Any venture capitalist would be pleased to get these kinds of returns. Now, of course, there's no investment management fees on this. There's no volatility, and it's indexed for inflation, all of which are real pluses. Now, in addition to all of that, a recent journal article in the journal Nature Energy, which is one of the world's top academic publications in this field, reported there is a 4 to 7% price increase for houses that have heat pumps compared to comparable houses that don't have heat pumps. So only the heat pump causes that increase in the house price. And that's on top of the 9% return on investment. So if you're thinking of selling your house, all of a sudden, adding a heat pump actually becomes a very rational decision, because it's likely to raise the price of your house beyond the cost of putting the heat pump in. So a good sales strategy there. You'll find something that's very similar for solar panels, which I'll get onto a little later on. Now, this means you no longer have to wait for the payback period, or 9 years, to get your money back. You get your money back, or even more than your money back, as soon as you sell your house, if you're thinking of selling your house. So, so things that people used to say a few years ago, like, it's going to be 5 years. I'm not planning on being in my house the next 5 years, so I'm not going to do solar. I'm not going to do heat pumps. Well, these things don't make any financial sense anymore, because now you can get your money back right away as soon as you sell your house. And if you don't sell your house, you just sit and collect the savings for the next many years. So these are our heat pumps. If you think they look like air conditioning units, you're exactly right. They do, and they actually plugged into the same electrical breakers in our panel as the old AC units that they replaced. Our old ones were from the 1970s and 1990s. One of them was literally 40 years old. One was about 20 years old. They were completely decrepit, and we replaced them. But rather than replacing them with AC units, we replaced them with slightly more expensive heat pumps, which both heat and cool the house. Now, they cool the house with the same efficiency as an air conditioning unit. But when the circuit is reversed in wintertime and they heat the house, they're heating with 2.5 times the efficiency of a furnace or boiler. This is a very big change in the efficiency of heating our house or your house. And this is a big contributor to cutting our carbon footprint and our bills. So let me just explain a bit about how heat pumps work, because this is often confusing to people. I find this is widely misunderstood. People think they're not familiar with heat pumps. It sounds like something they've never heard of, but it's not true. Everyone is familiar with heat pumps because there's one in your refrigerator. And what that does is it moves the heat from inside the refrigerator, making the inside cooler, making your milk cooler, and moves it to the back of the fridge. So if you've ever put your hand down the back of a fridge, it's warm. And you'll see that long row of thin black metal pipes. That's where the heat is coming out. That is the heat that was in your milk. It's been removed from the milk and pushed out the back. So it's cooling down the milk, and it's warming up the air in the kitchen. In fact, I can remember when I was a kid, my mother used to start trays of seedlings in the spring on top of the refrigerator because it was warmer up there and the seedlings would sprout faster. So that's how heat pump works in your refrigerator. Now just imagine that on a larger scale, the scale of your house, the size of your house, a refrigerator the size of your house. That is an air conditioning unit. It's cooling down the inside and heating up the outside. So if you go outside and you put your hand over your air conditioning unit outside in the summertime, it's really hot. So if it may be 80 degrees in your house and you're cooling it down to 75 or so, over the air conditioning unit outside, it'll be 100 or 110. Very, very hot, because that's all the heat that was inside your house that has been removed outside and is now warming up the air outside. Now, imagine reversing that circuit in the wintertime. And now the heat pump is moving heat from the outside to the inside. Now, this is a bit more counterintuitive because it's cold outside in wintertime, So a lot of people ask themselves, well, how come there's any heat in the air? How can you take the heat out of the air and put it inside if there's no heat in the air because it's cold? Well, that's because the temperatures we have around here, say 30, 40, 50 degrees Fahrenheit, are nowhere near something called absolute zero, which is where heat really ends. So as long as the temperature is above that, you can take the heat out and put it into your house, but the necessary consequence is you cool down the air outside. And I'll show you this. This is me. On the left-hand side, I'm measuring the temperature of my heat pump, of the air going into the heat pump. It's a very cold winter's day. It's 4.7 degrees Fahrenheit on the outside. You can see I'm wearing gloves. It's you can see the snow on the ground. On the right-hand side, I'm measuring the temperature over the heat pump on the exhaust side of the heat pump where the air is coming out. And you can see it's minus 19.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Unbelievably cold. In fact, it's so cold, if you put your hand over this, you get frostbite. So this is showing you how the heat pump is removing heat from the outside air, making the outside air colder still, very cold, and that heat is moved into the house and is making my house nice and warm in the summertime. This is how heat pumps work to heat your house in the wintertime. Now, what I just showed you was at our home where I am right now, which is where we have ductwork. We had the ductwork before we bought the heat pumps. We had it for the air conditioning and for the forced hot air heating system. This is pictures of our rental property, which does not have ductwork. So we put in what are called mini splits, ductless mini split units. It's the same technology, heat pumps, but you can see the outdoor unit there, and on the right-hand side you can see the ceiling-mounted indoor unit. I paid a bit extra to get the ceiling mounted units. Often these are wall mounted units or sometimes floor mounted units. They perform the same function. I just thought the looks of the indoor ones was better, and I paid a little bit extra to have them mounted in the ceiling there. So these ones are from Mitsubishi. The ones at our home, the ducted system was from Bosch. So so for details on which heat pumps we bought and why, and the zero interest loans that are available, please see the book Zero Carbon Home, which you'll get at the end here. Now, I do not recommend geothermal or ground source heat pumps. They will cut your carbon footprint. They're very good at that. We had a quote to do this on our house. It was $98,000 compared to the $26,000 for heat pumps. So it's 4 times expensive. This is mostly the cost of drilling the wells. The pump itself is fairly similarly priced. But it just made it, this is one of those things that made energy sense, but did not make financial sense. And there are several things you'll see that I'll refer to here that we looked at and didn't do, mostly because they made energy sense, but did not make financial sense. And finally, leave your furnace in place. Most heat pumps in New England will not be able to keep your house at 70 degrees if the outside temperature is below about 20 degrees. We have 2 instances here. Our house, where we have the Bosch ducted system, it can't keep the house at 70 degrees if it's below about 20 degrees outside, and neither can the Mitsubishi ductless system in our rental house. So that's the reality on the ground with these pumps. This is despite some of the claims of manufacturers, which will tell you these cold climate heat pumps will work at minus 14 degrees Fahrenheit. Well, it's just not been my experience. And so leave your furnace in place. So what you're really doing here is replacing your air conditioning units. You are not replacing your furnace. And you're replacing your air conditioning units with heat pumps that will both cool in the summer and will heat in the wintertime. So let me just pause here for a minute, Paul, and let's take a couple of questions on heat pumps.
Okay. First question is, how do you measure your carbon footprint in metric tons and track how much you're saving with each change?
Okay, so the way I did it is I just measured the heating oil use. We're on heating oil, not natural gas, in Dover, and so we have a tank. I think we've got 2 300-gallon tanks, and they have float gauges on the top, which measure the amount of heating oil in the tank. Now, they're not particularly accurate, so I developed a method that would make them far more accurate. And I was able to, in the wintertime, I was able to measure each day. I would use maybe 10 or 15 gallons of heating oil, and I could measure that change each day. As we got into spring and I was using less, I could only average it over maybe 5 days or sometimes even 10 days to get the average for that period. But that was accurate enough for me to be able to gauge the daily use of heating oil. And there's easy conversion factors you can just look up on the web that will convert the amount of gallons of heating oil into the carbon footprint in pounds or kilograms or tons. And so that's how I did it for, that's how I evaluated the carbon footprint for the heating oil. And then for electricity, my electricity is metered. I can easily measure it every single day if I want to. And the carbon footprint for utility electricity is published by Eversource, and it's about 1 pound of carbon dioxide for every kilowatt hour of electricity. So it's very easy then to just add up what the carbon footprint is each day from the electricity used and from the heating oil used. And then what I did is I tracked that every day, and then each time I added one of the Fab Four, I saw what the change was as I added them before and after, and that's how I got the change in carbon footprint and the change in dollars spent as well, which is what led into the cost savings, and that led into the net present value and the return on investment.
Okay, well, that leads right into a second question here. Does the same return on investment in a heat pump apply to a home using gas for heat as a home using oil for heat? Because most of the homes in Sharon are on gas.
Right. Okay. So the answer is no. Oil, it costs more to heat with. Oil costs about 8 cents per kilowatt hour of heat in the home, and natural gas costs about 5 cents. So 5 cents is cheaper to heat with than heating oil, which is why everyone who has the choice, like you do in Sharon, chooses natural gas. We don't have natural gas infrastructure in Dover, so almost everyone here is on heating oil. So the economics of a heat pump will be adverse if you've got compared to heating oil if you've got natural gas. However, that doesn't mean they don't make sense. What does make sense though is if you're on natural gas and you go to a heat pump and you're also on utility electricity like Eversource or National Grid, you're going to see your heating bills go up. Your carbon footprint will go down, but heating bills will go up. So the way to do this and both cut your carbon footprint and save money is to add solar panels at the same time. Because solar panels, you'll see in a minute when we get onto the solar panel section, can produce electricity from your rooftop at somewhere between 5, 6, 7, 8 cents per kilowatt hour. Well, you're paying Eversource and National Grid 23 cents per kilowatt hour. There's a massive reduction in the your electricity bill. And if you use that cheap electricity to power your heat pump, you'll be heating your house at half the cost of heating it with natural gas. That is the magic combination that even for natural gas users gets you to half your heating bill, and it's got a 0 carbon footprint. So really, this is kind of the magic. We've sort of got there very early in this presentation, but it's the combination of these things that get you there. It's not doing one thing on its own. Just doing insulation on its own is not going to do it. Just doing triple glazed windows is not going to do it. It's the combination of all of them, and in particular, doing the heat pumps with the solar panels that both reduces your carbon footprint to 0 and saves you money. Paul, you're muted.
We have time for one more question.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, can heat pumps work in traditional older homes where the rooms are closed off from one another?
So I've got to ask a few more questions there. If you have ductwork, then absolutely, because the ductwork will circulate the warm air and the cool air all the way around the house. If you don't have ductwork and you have baseboard radiators, then you need a different type of heat pump. It's still the same thing. It's an air source heat pump. It's just made by a different company. The companies that make the forceful air systems are companies you've heard of, like Carrier, Trane, American Standard, Mitsubishi, Bosch, Fujitsu. They're the companies that make air conditioning units. The companies that make the heat pumps that power baseboard radiator forced hot water systems are different. And it's companies like Daikin, D-A-I-K-E-N, I think, Jaeger, J-A-G-A, and SpacePak, S-P-A-C-E-P-A-K. All those names are on my website if you want to go and look it up. They're just made by different companies, but it's the same technology. It just outputs the heat as a stream of flowing water rather than the outputs the heat as a stream of flowing air. So those are the ways you can retrofit older homes with heat pumps and get all the heat spread around the house as you want it. If you have neither ductwork, if you have ductwork for air conditioning only, and you have baseboard radiators for heat, as some houses do, some older houses do, then you can add the heat pump and use the ductwork to get the air circulated around the house. That's probably the best combination. Should we move on?
Yeah,
no, ask
yeah, let's move on. We've got to
Okay.
get through this. We've got 3 more sections to do.
Yeah. I'll take all the questions at the end. So please, if you've got a question, just hang on to it. And I want to keep moving so we don't get too late this evening, because I'm sure some people have to go at a certain time. So I want to make sure we get through the through the whole presentation. And I'll just take the questions at the end, and I'll stay on as long as it takes. Okay, let's go. Let's go to the next next slide. Okay. So insulation, that's the next part of hits. So insulation cut our carbon footprint about 16%, about 7 tons, and saving us about $3,000. This is more than the money saved by the heat pump. But the heat pump cost us $26,000. The insulation cost me $1,000. It's so much cheaper, and it pays for itself in under a year. Over 100% return on investment. Now these tables, by the way, are all in the book, which you're all going to get for free. So there's no need to write all this stuff down or take screenshots or whatever. You can also download these slides. All these slides are available on my website. You can download all of them. So you don't have to write anything down. So this is the best return on investment I've ever made. By far the best. In fact, I wish I could invest more of my 401k in insulation. It's a shame that I can't. And I did mention earlier that colleague of mine who's making a 46% return on investment, he focused on insulation, air sealing, and he actually made his own triple glazed windows, which I'll show you later on, which I did as well in parts of my house. And by focusing on those things, which are the relatively low capital investment things, the solar panels and the heat pumps are the bigger capital investments, he made an even higher return than I've been making on mine. This often pays for itself in the first winter. And to, again, put this into context, you will do far more to save the planet from global warming by insulating the ceiling of your basement than you will by buying an electric vehicle. An electric vehicle will cut about 2 tons of carbon dioxide emissions compared to a gasoline vehicle doing the same mileage. But insulating the ceiling of my basement cuts 7 tons, and it cost me $1,000, whereas an electric vehicle is going to set you back probably $50,000. So there's really no comparison in terms of both the money, the time, and the impact of doing insulation versus buying an electric vehicle. Okay, so this is what we did on our house. We have a flat roof on our house. On the left-hand side, you can see that flat roof. It's got 10 inches of fiberglass between the joists there. And then on top, you can see that yellowish board. It's called iso board. It's really just spray foam in a board. It's very easy to just nail down to the rafters and very, very quickly get a roof. We have 10 inches of fiberglass. That's about R30. Insulation is measured in R values. More R is better. And the 2 layers of iso board at about R20. So a total of R50 between the two. That's a very well insulated roof. On the right-hand side, you can see the ceiling of our basement. That's the fiberglass that I added myself. I literally just pushed it up between the rafters there. It kind of stays by friction. And that gave the ceiling of our basement R38, up from maybe R1 before I did this. That had a very, very large effect on cutting our carbon footprint. There are 3 main types of insulation. On the left, you can see blown-in cellulose. This is literally sprayed into the attic. It's like shredded newspaper. It feels like shredded newspaper. Fiberglass, pink stuff you see in the middle there. And then on the right, you see spray foam, which is literally sprayed in. It's sticky, expands, and fills all the cavities there. And that's often used on the slope part of roofs. That has more R value per inch. But it's worth pointing out that it is not the cellulose in blown-in cellulose. It's not the glass in fiberglass. And it's not the plastic in spray foam that insulates. It's the air they trap. Air is a very good insulator, and that's why we try to encapsulate air and stop it moving around, because that's what provides the insulation benefit. Now let me talk about air sealing for a minute. Air sealing and insulation often go hand in hand, and if you get mass save, which I'll talk about in a minute, get a mass save contractor to do insulation for you, they will almost always do the air sealing at the same time. Air sealing is very cheap. We're just talking about blocking draft. So a can of spray foam is the only technology you need. You can get it from Home Depot for a couple of bucks. It's great fun, by the way, to go around filling holes in the basement or in the attic with spray foam. This can cut your energy use 25%. This has been my client's experience. And it's also very similar to what the Department of Energy says, that an average house loses about 30% of its heat through gaps and cracks in the walls. A major academic study found that insulating attics in row houses cut the energy use 8%, but insulating and air sealing cut it 18%. So this is clearly well worthwhile doing. And our house was quite airtight. Just its construction is pretty good. Just having a flat roof with a rubber membrane makes our roof airtight as well as watertight. And that prevents a lot of the normal air and drafts in houses compared to a typical A-framed roof, which has a lot of gaps and cracks in it. So this was not a big deal on our house, but it is a big deal on most people's houses. And most people will need both air sealing and insulation in order to get their carbon footprint down significantly. Mass Save, I mentioned, Mass Save will currently pay 100% of the cost. They're even more generous than when I wrote this slide. 100% of the cost of installation up to $2,000. This is this picture here is of peaches on my peach trees. In summertime, you can see the grass there. The branches are way down, almost to the ground. So this is the lowest hanging, ripest fruit in the zero carbon garden. So pick this by the bushel, because insulation will give you the best return on investment and will cut your heating bills and your carbon footprint significantly. So for details on which type is all in the book in chapter 1. If you don't live in Massachusetts, you can go to this website, dsireusa.org, where all the state incentives are listed state by state. So you can look up the California ones or the Iowa ones, and you don't have to just base it off the Massachusetts ones. Massachusetts is very generous in its subsidies. The Mass Save subsidies in particular are probably about the most generous in the country. The solar panel subsidies are, they're on the high end, but they're probably not the highest. And for insulation, I do not recommend that you take off your siding boards and thicken the walls with insulation and replace the siding. This is quite popular in the green building community. We had a quote to do this on our house. It was $150,000. I mean, the labor time involved in taking the siding off is just very, very high. So it's, again, one of those things like geothermal that makes energy sense. This will absolutely, definitely cut your carbon footprint. It will cut your energy bills. It just won't cut them very much. And so it won't pay for itself. It's very expensive and it doesn't save you much money, so it'll never pay for itself, at least not for decades. So this is something I do not recommend doing. So let's just pause here, Paul, and take a couple of questions more on insulation.
Yeah, with more insulation, do you have to worry about ventilation?
Not really. If you build a new house and you do it super tight, right, really, really tight construction, so you get almost no drafts whatsoever, then yes, you can get into problems with ventilation, and you can get mold, and that can cause asthma and all kinds of things. So you definitely don't want to get that tight. If you get that tight, you end up needing to have mechanical ventilation of air. You have a pipe in the basement where fresh air is sucked in to make sure there's enough air circulation in the house. But on a retrofit, on an existing house, it is almost impossible to get to those levels of air tightness. I've never seen any of my clients get even remotely close to where they'd need to have a mechanical ventilation strategy. We have no mechanical ventilation in our house. And I said our house is pretty tight because of that rubber roof. And we have vertical siding boards, not horizontal siding boards. And they're tongue and groove, which so they fit together very well. They're very well painted. So our house has very little air infiltration compared to most houses. And we have no problem whatsoever with ventilation. I have a little a meter that measures the indoor air quality. It's from a company called Foobot, about $100 on Amazon. But there's dozens of other indoor air quality monitoring systems. Well worthwhile getting one. And our air quality is consistently excellent. We never have musty smells or damp smells in the house. So this is actually pretty easy to do, and you really don't have to worry about your insulation becoming a problem with the ventilation.
Second question is, would you recommend rock wall type insulation? It may be called rock wool.
Yeah, I'm actually a big fan of rock wool. The biggest brand name is Roxul, R-O-X-U-L, if you've heard of it. The great thing about Roxul is it's made from rock, hence Roxul, rather than glass, hence fiberglass. But it's basically the same thing. It's the same thing. It's strands of melted rock that then become a board usually, rather than just a pad like you can get for fiberglass. But it's the great thing about it is it's a bit more robust than fiberglass. So it does come as a board. You can't really get fiberglass in a board. It's too floppy. But Roxul comes in boards, and it's very easy to just nail or screw the boards onto a wall. It's much easier than trying to get fiberglass into the wall. And it's a bit more our value per inch is about our 4 per inch compared to our 3 per inch for fiberglass. So I like Roxul. I think it's a very good product, and the board is stiff enough and has a like a paper finish to it. You can paint it, so you don't have to put drywall onto it. So I wouldn't do that in a living room, but if this is for a basement or an attic, you don't need to put the drywall on top of the Roxul board, which you do have to do if it's a flammable material behind the drywall, such as spray foam. Spray foam is flammable, and so by code you have to put drywall over it to make it non-flammable. You don't have to do that at Roxul. So for places like attics and basements, I think it's actually the best product for putting on walls and the floor.
Time for one more.
Yeah.
You have a finished basement. Does it make sense to insulate the ceiling of a finished basement that has living space?
Very good question, and the answer is no, because if your basement, like our basement, is used for luggage storage and that kind of stuff, in which case you don't mind it getting a bit colder, so you insulate the ceiling of the basement and keep the warm air up in the house, and don't let that warmth go down to the basement below. If you're using that space below as living space, then of course you want it to be warm. So you don't want to have that that insulation on the ceiling of the basement. You want the insulation on the walls and the floor of your basement. This is where something like Roxul comes in, because it's very easy to add to the wall, and puts insulation on the inside of the wall, and you can add it to the floor as well if you want to, but usually people don't. You probably want something a bit more structural on the floor. It's very hard to add insulation to the floor of a basement unless you do it when the house is being built. When the house is being built, you can put insulation under the concrete and give you a much better thermal envelope. If your house is already built and you're just retrofitting it, it's very hard. You can do it, but it's hard to do it on the floor. So the better thing to do is just put it on the walls. That will keep your basement much warmer. And then on the floor, maybe you put a extra thick pad underneath your carpet, and at least that will add, R3 or something like that, which is not brilliant, but it's better than nothing, and will keep your feet much warmer in the basement.
That's a great answer. Well, we have more questions here, but I think we need to keep moving.
Yeah.
So maybe those who want to ask their questions at the end can do so then.
Yep, let's do that later. Okay, let's go on to the third part of HITS, the Fab Four, to triple glazed windows. So we added these, and they cut about 5% of our carbon footprint, about 2 tons per year, saving us about $1,000, cost us only about $5,000 to put them in, pays for itself in about under 5 years, with a 19% return on investment, again after tax. Now you may be saying that's an awfully small amount of money to spend on a window. This is the additional cost of triple glazed windows above and beyond the cost of double glazed equivalents, and it's the additional savings on triple glazed windows above and beyond the cost of double glazed equivalents. And the reason we did that is because we had to replace our windows anyway. So it's not like we were ripping out perfectly good windows and replacing them, which I don't recommend you do. Our windows were falling apart. And if you're in the situation where your windows have to be replaced, it is much a better financial investment for you to spend a few bucks extra and get the triple glazed, because it'll save you money, pay for itself in 5 years, rather than getting double glazed. But if your windows are perfectly good, there's no point ripping out perfectly good windows to replace them. If you do have perfectly good windows, I recommend something different, which I'll show you in a minute, which are window inserts that you can fit from the inside of the window and add a pane of glass. So if you've got double glazed already, you've now got a triple glazed window, but it costs you $200 a window, not thousands of bucks, which is what new replacement windows would cost you. So these are the new windows in our house. In fact, I'm just going to skip ahead and just show you. These are the old windows in our house. These are the 1970s era double glazed, and you can see that the panel has misted up on the left there. This is common in panels in double glazed windows from the 70s and 80s. And on the right, you can see where the duct tape is covering up the gaps in the window, where the house has subsided a little over time, and there's now a 1-inch gap there between the frame and the window. So just going back, so those windows were replaced with these windows, which are triple glazed windows, and we can see the garden. Like, for the first time in 20 years in our house, we can actually see the garden. And this is our living room. And the old living room, having Christmas in our living room was not pleasant. There was too much of a cold draft of the windows. The windows didn't fit very well, so we had drafts through the windows as well as drafts off the windows. And it was just not pleasant to be there. Even with the heating system turned fully up, the heating system could not keep the living room at a pleasant temperature. That is all changed now. These windows don't have air blowing through them like the old ones did. They don't have air, cold air dropping down the window because they're much warmer because of the triple glazing. And they also look much nicer. I'm sure you'll agree. These ones do not look as nice as these ones. Now I paid a bit extra to have the wood trim. I like the wood trim; it looks very nice. But these are our homes talking about. It's not like it's all about the carbon footprint and the bills. How they look, how they live are important to us, and there's no point denying that. And this really has transformed the way our house looks and the way our house feels, and it lives much better. We live in this living room far more than we did in the past. It was just too cold in the past. These are the ones that have now gone. So what is a triple glazed window, particularly one with low E coatings, which I'll explain in just a minute? So single glazed, just a single pane of glass, a very low R value, less than R1. Double glazed with a 1/2 inch gap of air in between the two panes of glass, about R2 or over double what the single glazed window has. Triple glazed, 3 panes of glass and 2 air gaps. Remember, it's the air that does the insulating. Remember I talked about the cellulose, the fiberglass. It's not the fibers, it's the air that does the insulating. Same thing here. So triple glazed, much better, R3.3. Triple glazed with low E coatings, which I'll explain in a minute, can get you to R4 to R6. So those windows I just showed you at our house on the ground floor, those are R4. On the upper floor, we have slightly better ones. They're R5 upstairs. Remember, it's the air that insulates, not the glass. And remember, a double glazed window plus a storm window is not a triple glazed window. This is a myth perpetuated by the glazing industry. The air has to be trapped in order for it to insulate. If the air is circulating because that storm window is a bit loose and the wind's blowing, it's not going to keep you warm. It will protect the window from the sun and the rain, which is what storms are supposed to do, but it's not going to do much insulation for you, and it's not a triple glazed window. Now, the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory has studied low E coatings on windows, and they've concluded that Americans have saved over $150 billion a year by, I'm sorry, not a year, have saved cumulatively $150 billion on heating bills just from having low E coatings on windows, which is not bad for something that's completely invisible. Now, this is me modeling triple glazed windows. On the left, you see me wearing a t-shirt. That is like a single glazed window. It does block the wind, but it does not trap any air and it has no insulating value. I'm wearing a sweater in the green one in the middle. One sweater is like a double glazed window. I've got one layer of air trapped against my body. If I put on 2 sweaters, it's like a triple glazed window. I've got 2 layers of air trapped against my body. And then if I put on 2 sweaters and I wrap one of those shiny foil space blankets around me, that's like a low E coating, is reflecting the infrared light or the heat back to my body, keeping me warmer still. So that's how a low E triple glazed windows work. It's a bit like having 2 sweaters and an emergency space blanket around you. Now, how they work is kind of like this. So on the outside here, at the outside of the triple glazed window, you've got the light from the sun coming towards you. The visible light goes straight through, unimpeded, just like it does through regular glass. But the ultraviolet light, which is the kind of light that gives you a sunburn, and it's what fades your carpets and your photographs, that is reflected away by that low E coating on the outside. So the ultraviolet light doesn't get into your house. You don't want the ultraviolet light in your house. It just overheats the place in the summertime, and it fades your photographs and carpets and things. On the inside, though, imagine it's now a winter's day. My body's at 98 degrees Fahrenheit. The room's at 70 degrees. We are emitting infrared light. That's heat. And that infrared light is now reflected back into the room by that low E I89 coating on the inside. The one on the outside is sometimes called low E 180. The one on the inside is called low E I89 for reflecting back the infrared. And with those two, you keep the ultraviolet out and you keep the infrared in. So now you've got the air trapped between the glass, keeping you nice and warm, like those sweaters, like the fiberglass. But in addition, you've got these low E coatings that are keeping the bad stuff out and keeping the good stuff in, which greatly improve the insulation in addition to the air gaps in the windows. Now, this is the right solution if you're replacing your windows, but what if your windows are in perfectly good shape? Then here's what you need to do. On the left here, this is now upstairs at our rental property. We've got these old double hung sash windows with the divided lights there with the little panels. And this is a fit from the inside triple glazed window. This is one I've push fit into the window frame. It just sits among the reveals of the wood frame, and is snug fitted in with it's actually spring loaded, so that you just got to squeeze the sides in, push it in, and the sides expand out. This is made of glass, and in the middle here you can see the picture I took with an infrared camera. Infrared camera shows heat, and the warmer is yellow here, and the colder is purple. And you can just about see in the middle there, the temperature, it says 63.3 degrees Fahrenheit. The day I did this is about 40 degrees Fahrenheit outside. And in fact, you can see on the single glazed window on the right, so I've got an experiment and a control here. The experiment is the window insert. The control, excuse me, is the window without the insert, just the original single glazed window. And you can see the temperature of the window insert is only about 40 degrees. Well, if you're sitting in front of a 40-degree window, your feet will be freezing cold because there'll be a column of cold air moving down the window and across your feet. Your face will feel cold because you're not getting the heat from that wall that you are from the other walls around you. If you're sitting in front of a 63-degree window, your feet are going to be warm and your face is going to be warm. It's night and day. And these things cost $200. They're really inexpensive, and they pay for themselves in about 5 years just on the heating bill savings alone. So for more details on how to shop for triple glazed windows, all in the book. Which types of low E glass I recommend for which locations. You need different low E for a north facing window or a south facing window. How to get the zero interest loans, all in the book. And I do not recommend that plastic stretchy film. You can buy at every hardware. So it's like saran wrap, but you go over it with a hairdryer and it stretches out. I've tried that. It does work. It does actually insulate your glass, but that sticky tape pulls the paint off the frames when you take it off. And that's if it works pretty well. If it works badly, like it did in my case, the glue came off the sticky strip and attached itself to the window frame, and I can't get it off. So I walked away with a nice strip of plastic in my hand. The glue is still on the frame. I can't get it off, and there's this nasty sticky strip that is collecting ants and flies and ladybugs and things as they crawl across it. So I really don't recommend the stretchy film. These windows, if you want to do that, get the fit from the inside windows, because they're only about $200 and they work far better than that stretchy plastic stuff, and they won't take the paint off your frames. Paul, let's stop here for a couple of questions on triple glazed windows.
Okay, can you apply a low E coating on an old window?
So no, you can't. Low E is actually a metal, and the metal has to be vaporized and deposited onto the glass. That's a very high temperature process. You can do it in a factory, but you can't do it at home. So you can't add this to existing windows. The best you can do is that that window insert, the one I showed you there, is made by a company called Inner Glass, which is actually in Connecticut. You can literally drive down and pick up your windows if you want. That has a low E coating on it. The other three manufacturers, which I review in the book, all use plastic. One's polycarbonate, one's acrylic, and one uses someone else. And you can't put a low E coating on plastic because of the temperature requirements, but you can put it on glass. That's one of the reasons I recommend that Inner Glass one. It's glass, it looks much better. And because of that additional low E coating, its R value is about double that of the plastic sheets. So I definitely recommend those ones. And that's the best way to do it, is to buy a glass insert. Or if you've got a fixed panel of glass, it's not an opening window, it's just a panel of glass. It's very cheap to actually remove that glass and put in a low E triple glazed pane of glass. That's the cheapest way to upgrade a window is just to take out the window if it's just glass and doesn't have any opening mechanism like a casement or a sash window. If it's fixed glass, you're in luck. It's cheap and easy and very effective to do that.
Okay, one more question. Would you recommend argon gas? It's invisible. How would we know if it leaks? Is it cost effective?
So the answer is yes. Argon is well worth it. Argon increases the R value because argon is denser than air, and so it just creates more insulation between the panes of glass. Krypton, which you may also hear about, is not worth it. Krypton is quite a bit more expensive than argon, and it gives you only a tiny benefit in terms of extra insulation. But the argon is well worth it. I definitely recommend the low E with the argon coating in the triple glazed format for replacement windows, or just for that single pane if you want to do the window inserts.
Okay, well, I guess well, let's keep moving on to the
Okay.
last section.
Okay. So the final part of HITS, heat pumps, insulation, triple glazed windows, and solar panels, is solar panels. So this was the second biggest cut to our carbon footprint, about a third, about 14 tons, saving us almost $6,000 a year. The investment was the biggest of all of these. The second biggest was the heat pumps at about $26,000. This is $42,000. I have a lot of solar panels, and this is after the federal and the state subsidies, which I'll get onto in a minute. Pays for itself in about 7 years. Return on investment about 13% again after tax. Now this is all based off just the energy bill savings, the electricity bill savings. In addition to that, this academic article published in the Appraisal Journal estimates, based off an analysis of 49,000 homes across the US in all climate zones and all heating fuels over 5 years using Census Bureau data. This is as rigorous as it gets, comparing a house with solar panels to a house without solar panels, all other things being equal. Estimates our house prices increased by $111,000 from installing the solar panels alone. Not all the Fab 4, just the solar panels. Now that's an empirical look at what happens to real house prices approach. There's a different approach, which is theoretical. You can go to a website called pvvalue.com, and they use the same methodology I use financially, which is discounted cash flow, and they estimate that our house prices increased to $105,000. So the theoretical result, $105,000, agrees with the empirical result, $111,000. So that's estimated is pretty good. Now that is more than double our net investment in solar panels, $42,000. It's actually more than our net investment in all of the Fab 4. Now remember, heat pumps increase your house price 4 to 7%. Solar panels increase your house price by if you want to. The metric is $20 of house price increase for every $1 in utility bill savings. That's how PV Value does this. That's the theoretical approach. The Census Bureau approach gets you about the same number for the solar panels. So this is really a breakthrough. You now not only get paid to cut your carbon footprint, but it increases your house price too. And this really takes away the resistance point that a lot of people have felt with solar panels in the past, which is that I'm not going to be in my house for 7 years, and it's going to take 7 years to pay for itself. We don't need to wait 7 years now. In fact, as I mentioned earlier, adding solar panels and adding heat pumps is actually looks like a great way to increase the value of your house prior to selling it, because the cost of installing the heat pumps and the solar panels is less than the house price increase you get from adding them. This is our solar panel around our roof. I mentioned it's a flat roof. You can see the rubber membrane in the background there with the solar panels on top. This is how solar panels work. Light comes from the sun, hits the solar panel. Some very fancy quantum mechanics happens, but you just don't care because electricity just pours out the other side. And the electricity that comes from a solar panel is something called DC, or direct current electricity, which is the kind of electricity you have in a battery, and your car uses DC electricity. But all of your appliances in your house use AC, or alternating current. So the DC is converted to AC by a device called an inverter that's fed to your meter. Your meter continues the connection to the street, so you can always have power from the street if your solar panels aren't producing, like at night, and then that power is fed to your house to power all your appliances. Now, when you install solar panels, your utility company will replace your existing meter, which is a one-way meter, with a net meter that reads electricity flowing both ways, so they can give you credit for the solar panel production. In the summertime, you're going to be producing far more electricity than you can use, and then you get a credit for that on your bill, and you can draw down those credits in the wintertime. So for the full cycle of the year, you can have a zero carbon footprint. This is our solar power generation over the course of a year. You can see very significant day-to-day variations, very significant seasonality. And I don't even show the day-to-night variations, but despite all of these variations, you'll always have electricity because of that grid connection and net metering. And what this means, you'll always have light and heat, and of course, the really important stuff like Netflix and Wi-Fi, and a place to charge your cell phone at night. Because and that's why net metering is the law in 44 states, because it's the essential to getting solar panels to be widely adopted, and the whole process is completely invisible to you. You never notice it at all, unless and until you see the much lower electricity bills. Now, Here's the economics of our panel array. It's a fairly large array, 17 kilowatts. The gross cost is the check I wrote to the installer was $56,000. The federal tax credit back then was 30%. It's now 26%. It was due to drop to 22% for 2021, but it's been retained at 26% for the next couple of years. Massachusetts has a tax credit of $1,000. The present value of the future income, which I'll get from the SREC program. Now, SREC has been replaced by SMART. I'll explain that in just a minute. That was about 23,000. So the net cost is only 14,000. That's a huge reduction from 56 gross costs. I only ended up net paying 14,000. Now, this array is guaranteed to produce power for 25 years by the panel manufacturer. And just taking that guaranteed number of kilowatt hours, this array is costing me about, or the electricity, I'm sorry, it's costing me about 5 cents per kilowatt hour compared to Eversource or National Grid at 24 cents. This is a huge reduction in the cost of electricity. The net present value or total profit I make on this investment is about $29,000, and the return on investment is about 14%. That's after tax. So it pays for itself in about 7 years. Now, I do have some consulting clients, and I've recently bid out solar panels for one of those clients. And the recent bidding, which is under the new subsidy scheme, not the old one, the new one is called SMART, the old one was called SREC, came in the 4 to 6 cents per kilowatt hour range. My array in 2017 is producing power at 5 cents per kilowatt hour. So it's still as good today, even though tariffs have gone up on solar panels, even though the subsidies have gone down on solar panels. The net cost is now lower than it was even 3 or 4 years ago when I put my solar panels in place. So it's still extremely good value for money. Now, you don't need to do all these calculations yourself. If you use a tool on the Department of Energy website, it's called Energy Stage website, www.energystage.com. They will do all the calculations for you. And this is great because I've never seen a solar panel installer do net present value calculations correctly. I've seen dozens of proposals from solar panel installers. I've never seen one do it correctly, and it's kind of tricky to do. So you're much better off using the Energy Sage website. Everyone uses a slightly different methodology, but on the Energy Sage website, every installer has to submit the same methodology. So at least you can compare apples to apples because all the numbers are a good comparison. Now, even partly shaded roofs, and my garage roof is partly shaded. It has 100-foot tall pine trees only 50 feet away on the southwest side. So it doesn't get much sun in the afternoon. And even that array produces power at about 11 cents per kilowatt hour, which is still less than half of what Eversource tries to charge me. So even partly shaded arrays or partly shaded roofs can produce very cheap solar panels, solar power today. So if you've been told in the past that your roof is too shady for solar panels, it's time to revisit it, because even partly shaded roofs can produce very cheap electricity, and of course it's 100% green at the same time. So for details on how to perform these calculations, if you want to do the calculations, it's all in the book. Lease, loan, cash purchase options, all in the book. There is a lot of low interest. Actually, I'm sorry, no, the low interest finance has actually been discontinued. As of January the 1st this year, the solar loan has been discontinued. Don't really weep about it though, because many banks will now offer very aggressive interest rates on loans for solar panels, because they've figured out that if you lend money to someone and it reduces their bills, well, they have more cash flow with which to repay the loan. So they're lending to very good borrowers. So local banks like Needham Bank, Wellesley Bank, Webster Bank, they now offer very aggressive low interest loans that are actually even cheaper than the solar loan, which has now been done away with. And if you're not in Massachusetts, go to the same website where you can get the state-by-state listing of incentives. And I do not recommend solar hot water panels. These are the type of panels that are usually black. They sit on roofs, water flows through them, you get hot water out at the end. The problem with those is they overproduce the hot water in summertime and they underproduce the hot water in the wintertime. But you need it in the wintertime. The great thing about net metering is you overproduce the solar panel, the electricity in the summertime, you store up the credits, you draw down the credits in the wintertime. So you are much better off using solar panels, which effectively allow you to store the at least the energy from your solar panels, and then use that to run a heat pump hot water tank with it, which is 4 times as efficient as a furnace, That's a much better combination than running solar hot water panels. It's all in chapter 4 in the books. If you're interested in a battery, batteries are a very new area. The subsidies in Massachusetts are very generous for batteries right now. The latest information is on my website. It's not in the books. The books are now probably 9 months out of date. And that's enough. The subsidies for batteries, at least, to have moved on. So if you're interested in getting a battery, please go to my website and just check out the webinar Q&A. So I will write up the questions and answers in this webinar and email those out to everyone within a few days. I've done that with all the prior webinars, and there's a whole bunch of questions, over 100 questions with their answers on my website, and there's a whole section on batteries for solar panels. Let's just pause here, Paul, and take a couple of questions on solar.
Okay, first one is interesting, getting to the money part. What is the discounting rate on your discounted cash flow calculation?
3%.
Okay, that's pretty straightforward. And the next question, have you had a chance to analyze the efficiency of solar roofs such as Tesla roof? Is it worth the cost if it's south-facing and a simple gable shape?
So the answer to your second question is no, it's not. It's not worth the cost. There was a recent publication, a recent interview with a Tesla employee who had built his own house and had used the solar panels, the solar tiles, I'm sorry, on his roof. And he was quoted in the article as saying, these panels are great, I recommend them. They cost 35% more than the cost of regular solar panels, plus the cost of a new roof. Now, this is a sales guy who works for Tesla who's telling you that his solar roof from Tesla costs 35% more than regular solar panels and the cost of a new roof. It does not make financial sense.
Sounds like we need to go back to the drawing board on that one. Energy Sage is not run by DOE. It is a private for-profit company. Can you confirm or refute that?
Yes, so it actually began as part of the Department of Energy. It was originally a Department of Energy run website, but you're absolutely right. It was then sold off or spun off or something. It's no longer run by the DOE. I should actually remove that reference. You're right. It is a private company now. However, they still do all the calculations for you, and they will solicit bids from contractors for you. So I still recommend it. It's well worthwhile doing, versus having to do all these calculations yourself, which is kind of tedious. Unless you're in the financial industry and you understand this stuff, it's a piece of cake. But if you're not familiar with discounted cash flow, it's too easy to make a mistake. So just have the Energy Sage website do it all for you.
Okay, and one more here. Is the solar panels don't work during power outages, right?
So yes and no. So what happens is during a power outage, when the grid goes down, by law, solar panels must shut down. And every single solar panel installation has an automatic switch that turns it off. This is to avoid your panels putting power out to the grid when the lineman comes along to reconnect the wires, because they get electrocuted by the power that you're putting out there. So by law, all solar panels must disconnect from the grid during a power outage. However, you can reconnect them behind the meter, meaning your panels are now powering your house loads, your television and everything, without going to the grid. And if you get a battery like a Tesla Powerwall battery or a Sonnen or Generac battery, they come with the device. It's called a gateway that allows you to manage this. And what this allows you to do, if you get this set up right, this is not trivial to do this properly, but if you get this set up right, you can not only isolate your house from the grid, meaning you use your battery like a backup generator, so that you do the same thing during a power outage. You have to disconnect your backup generator from the grid, so you're not putting power out to the street, and then that power feeds your emergency panel in the house and puts on your lights and fridge and stuff like that. You can reconnect your battery to that same isolated behind the meter emergency circuit, just like you can connect a backup generator. But if you ask a lot of questions, it can be done to allow your solar panels to charge your battery during a grid outage. Now, to me, that is the best solution, because if you buy, say, a 15 kilowatt hour battery, that's enough for me to run my house overnight. Not the heat pump, but everything else can be run overnight. using a 15 kilowatt hour battery. If I can then recharge that battery during the day, and even on a dull winter's day, I can produce 15 kilowatt hours. I can recharge my battery during the day and basically keep the house going forever during a power outage. That's what I'm working on right now, right? So I'm currently trying to buy batteries to go at our rental place and our home to replace defunct backup generators, and to have it done this way, so they will automatically recharge from the solar panels during a grid outage. That is, it's not in the wheelhouse of most solar installers. They're not familiar with it. You can do it. The technology exists, but it's not something they're very familiar with. It's kind of a new thing to be doing, but you can do it.
Okay, that leads into another question here. And I'm going to say that this will be the last question I read off of the
Okay. Yeah.
chat, and then we can go to live questions. So you can click on, I think it's, is it participants? There's a place to raise your hand. So I can call on people if you raise your hand after I read this question and answer it. Would you recommend battery storage systems such as Tesla Powerwall or many other brands instead of gas operated generator?
So I'm currently in the process of replacing 2 propane power generators, one at our house, one at our rental property, with battery storage. To make this pay for itself is a little tricky, and that's why I recommend go to my website. There's tons of questions and answers on batteries there. But the short answer is, if you put a battery in with a large solar panel array, by large I mean at least 15 kilowatts, the subsidy you get under the smart system is based on how many kilowatt hours you produce. If you have a battery, you get an additional subsidy called an adder. The current subsidy for just solar panels is about 8 cents per kilowatt hour in Eversource territory. It varies by National Grid versus Eversource. And the additional subsidy for the battery is about 4 cents per kilowatt hour. So that can add up to a lot of money over 10 years. The subsidy comes in for 10 years. They literally send you a check, which is kind of nice. You literally get a check in the mail every month from your utility company for the smart subsidy. So if you add up that battery subsidy, plus there's an additional subsidy now by Eversource. I'm not sure this is available in National Grid, but for Eversource, they have a program called Connected Solutions where they will pay you to rent your battery. And what they want to do is rent your battery during peak summertime loads when Eversource has to pay a fortune to get emergency electricity onto the grid because everyone's got their AC units on. So what they want to do instead is pay to rent your battery, and during the summer they'll discharge your battery to the grid without you even knowing about it. And so they basically get cheaper, cleaner electricity during those peak periods on the grid. Now, they will never drain your battery if there's a storm coming. So Eversource checks the weather forecast, make sure there's no storm coming, so you don't want to be, with your battery depleted at the time when the storm comes. So I plan on enrolling my 2 batteries in that Connected Solutions program. It pays you about $1,200 a year. It's supposedly for 5 years, but it might last for 10 years. So you add all these subsidies up, and this is why when the batteries are paired with a fairly large array and you get all the subsidies, the battery can actually pay for itself. So I think batteries are good value for money right now, particularly if you're faced with a decision to replace a generator, as I am. I've got 2 dead generators. So I have to replace them with something, and I'm going to be going with batteries rather than new generators.
Okay, well, I don't see any hands up right now, no digital hands up. So I'll ask you one more question on a macro scale. What are your thoughts on the Texas issue? What happened last week in Texas?
So I deliberately don't do politics. I do saving money and cutting carbon footprints. I think what happened in Texas is not likely to happen in New England, and the big difference is Texas pays about 12 to 14 cents per kilowatt hour, whereas we pay 23 to 24 cents per kilowatt hour. There's a cost to having cheap electricity. Now, I think we are overcharged for our electricity here in Massachusetts, but nevertheless, we do have a very robust grid compared to places like Texas, where the revenue from the electricity isn't really enough to be able to invest in a very robust grid. That's as far as I'll go.
Okay, we have a question from Colin Barbera. You want to, there you go, Colin, thanks.
Yep. Hi, my name's Colin. I have an 8-kilowatt solar panel system. I have actually 2 arrays. One was installed 5 years ago. One was installed about 3 years ago. And I've been considering a home battery, but you just said that it's really not worth your while unless you have a 15-kilowatt system. So what do you do if you have a smaller than a 15-kilowatt system?
So it may still be worthwhile for you, Colin, but do you know, are your arrays enrolled in SMART or are they enrolled in SREC?
They're in SREC 1 and SREC 2.
Okay, so you can't get the SMART subsidy because your arrays are enrolled in SREC. So for you, you'd be looking at not getting much of a subsidy for your battery. You could still get the Eversource Connected Solutions payment for the battery, and that would reduce the cost of the battery to you. But it's not going to be as attractive for you as someone buying a new battery and a new array at the same time, because the new array will be enrolled in SMART, and SMART has subsidies for batteries, whereas SREC has no subsidy for batteries. So I think you'd have to look at it under those set of financial circumstances, because it's not going to be as attractive to you as it would be to someone else. But if you're faced with a decision, Colin, of replacing your backup generators, or adding a backup generator, you may still find it's worthwhile. And I'm going for, because I've got bigger arrays and they are enrolled in SMART, I can get the subsidy. For me, the batteries are very good value for money and are clearly a better solution financially, as well as having a zero carbon footprint compared to a backup generator. For you, I think you're going to have to run the numbers carefully to see how much you're going to save. But my gut feel, Colin, would be if you get into the Connected Solutions program and then don't buy a generator, so you're saving the money on the generator. You know, I would guess it's going to cost you a few $1,000s, but that's going to be about what it would cost you to get a generator anyway. So I think it might still be a good deal for you, but if I was in your shoes, I'd want to go and do those calculations to make sure.
Yeah, no, I did price it out a little bit, and it was closer to like $7,000.
For the battery?
Yeah, for the size battery they said I should have.
And is that after the Connected Solutions subsidy?
I don't know. I'm very new at the battery part, so I don't know.
I would ask that question. Who's installing this for you, Colin?
No one's installing anything for me right now.
Okay.
I'm just digging for information.
Okay, so I would contact a couple of solar installers. It tends to be the solar installers who do the batteries, because they go hand in hand with the subsidies, and ask them about to give you a payback analysis,
right,
including the Connected Solutions subsidy. Because Eversource, who runs Connect, are you on Eversource, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So Eversource runs the Connected Solutions program. I don't think National Grid does. But if you're on Eversource, that subsidy is so big, it's about $1,200 a year. So, you know, and they've kind of committed to doing it for 5 years, and they may well do it for 10 years, because, you know, once the utility has it in their tariff, it's hard to get rid of it. So I think you can count on 5 years of subsidy at, you know, $1,250. That's $7,500. You know.
Okay. Yep.
So I think you might find with the subsidies, it might be, maybe you cost a couple of $1,000 out of pocket because you've got to get it installed and everything, but that might be worth it compared to doing a generator.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Don Pawlowski, would you unmute yourself and go ahead?
What coolant is used in the heat pump?
So good question, John. So the coolant, which is sometimes called a refrigerant in the heat pumps, is something called R410A. And R410A is a hydrofluorocarbon, which may sound familiar because their cousins, chlorofluorocarbons, are well known because CFCs, chlorofluorocarbons, depleted the ozone layer and caused a hole in the ozone layer over Antarctica. They were banned in the 1990s at some point, and they were replaced with HFCs, of which the current generation is R410A. And R410A does not cause depletion of the ozone layer, but it does cause global warming. And this was only found out later on, but current generation refrigerants are about 1,000 times as potent as carbon dioxide at causing global warming. So you really don't want these things being released into the atmosphere. Now, if your system's well installed, it won't release into the atmosphere. But a new generation of refrigerants is coming out, and I forget the number now, but it's something like R544 or something like that. It's coming out, probably going to be a couple of years. Those are called HFOs, or HF hydrofluoroolefin, which neither deplete the ozone layer nor cause global warming. But I've done the calculations on this on my own, because I had a problem with one of my heat pumps, and actually it did leak the refrigerant gas out, and I was really upset with my installer, because obviously I bought these things to try to cut my carbon emissions, not to have a problem. So I did all the calculations, and even having the entire charge of refrigerant gas escape the atmosphere, I don't remember the number off the top of my head. I think it was equivalent to about 2 tons of carbon dioxide, but the heat pumps are saving me 20 tons of carbon dioxide by not burning fossil fuels every year. So that made me feel a lot better, that even though there were leaks in the pipes and it leaked out and I had to recharge it, it was still a much better decision from a global warming point of view to have the heat pumps than to not have them.
So you're saying that the current heat pumps still have the old refrigerants in them?
They have the current generation, which is the R410A, which is the HFC or hydrofluorocarbon. The new ones, the HFOs, are not out yet, and they won't be out for another couple of years. And what I was trying to say to you in a rather long-winded way is I wouldn't delay buying a heat pump to replace an air conditioning unit at this time, because you're going to save something like 20 tons of carbon dioxide emissions every year from having a heat pump compared to an oil-fired furnace, and a bit less than that compared to natural gas, maybe 13, 14 tons on natural gas. And that is going to more than cover any risk of leakage of the refrigerant from the heat pumps.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Don. Artie Crocker, how about you?
Hey, Paul. Hey, Dave. Yeah, just a little bit of information. So National Grid, the Connected Solutions program is in National Grid. A matter of fact,
Okay.
it actually started in National Grid, I don't know, almost 2 years ago, not quite 2 years ago. And Eversource was actually a little slow to the table getting into it, especially with Tesla Powerwalls. It was slow to the table. And as far as solar array sizes versus battery sizes, a lot of times it's basically inverter size for this battery versus inverter size for the solar. For example, if you have a very large solar system, and let's say it's a 12 kilowatt AC, 13 kilowatt AC, something to that effect, that can't be fed into a battery which doesn't have an inverter which can handle that power going into it. So there's a balance between what size array you have and what battery you can feed into. So for example, your array, you may have to be split up and only part of it feeding into the battery, depending on what size you're going.
Yeah, so I think the point I was really making here is that this is complicated, and that's why there's a lot of information on my website. The batteries are fairly new. They're certainly fairly new within Smart, and most of the solar installers are still figuring out how to do this right. Because Art's exactly right. There are current output requirements, like how many amps your battery can discharge. There are kilowatt hour requirements, and Eversource is, maybe National Grid is better, but Eversource has not been particularly clear about exactly what the requirements are to get their subsidies. But
yeah, the math is definitely a little weird, even though they give a formula. The formula doesn't really work the way they say it is, and plus the fact in the Connected Solutions program, there's only really about four battery manufacturers right now, maybe 5, that are allowed into the Connected Solutions program. To be into it, I mean, you can't just simply be a battery. It has to be a qualified type of battery, plus the fact that there has to be a software integration with the battery and the utility company. So there's several things that have to go on.
So there's hurdles you have to kind of jump over. But what I've concluded from kind of being in this morass for a while now is it's getting to the point where it's worth it. Getting to the point where if you do have a fairly large solar panel array and you meet all the requirements, you can get that battery to be almost free. It will pay for itself within the first, I think 6, 7, 8 years. So I think the shift is starting to take place from the benefits of a fossil fuel backup generator to the benefits of a battery.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you look at
Okay,
if you look at your calculations,
thank you, Art.
you may find
We have
that
another question here, and we're running short on time. So
doubling your battery may double your incentive money. So take a look at that, David.
Yep, thank you, Art.
thank you, Art. Sheila Richardson has a question here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, Sheila. Are you? No, you're not muted. Can you hear me, Sheila? Go ahead.
I'm not muted. I'm speaking.
I can hear you.
now.
You're a bit faint.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. I wanted to know, do you know when they're going to come out with a better lithium battery or something else? I was reading recently where the lithium battery is so easy to catch on fire and it has complications in extreme cold.
So both of those are very minor problems. I won't say they're not problems, but lithium batteries can, on extremely rare occasions, catch fire. But it's extremely rare, and your house is far less likely to burn down from a battery fire than it is from a stovetop fire. But these problems tend to be blown out of all proportions, particularly by manufacturers of competing batteries using a different but similar technology called lithium iron phosphate, which is less prone to catching fire, but they tend to cost a bit more. So a lot of this stuff is information being put out by competing manufacturers. So the battery I'm intending to buy, if I can get through all the paperwork, is one of the lithium iron phosphate batteries. But that's not the reason. This fire risk issue is not the reason. I was perfectly comfortable with buying a Tesla Powerwall battery, which has that lithium only construction and is hence slightly vulnerable to the fire. The reason I'm doing it is because the Tesla Powerwall battery cannot be configured to recharge from the solar panels simultaneously while it discharges to power the house. The Tesla Powerwall battery must be run down completely before it charges up. And that is fine if you've got a car, because a car either charges or discharges. It never does both at the same time. But if you want your solar panels to recharge your battery during a grid outage in the wintertime, you need to charge and discharge your battery at the same time. The only battery that can do that with my solar panels is one made by Sonnen, S-O-N-N-E-N. There is another battery I've looked at called Generac, which is a very good battery, but it doesn't work with my inverters. And so since my solar panels already exist and we've got the inverters, it makes no sense to rip out all the inverters and replace them with Generac inverters. So I've ended up at a battery, which is a Sonnen one, which is not cheap. It's in fact probably about the most expensive battery on the market. It's much more expensive per kilowatt hour than Tesla, but it does what I want it to do, which is charge from my solar panels during a grid outage, so I can both charge my battery and run my house. And the subsidies are so generous that even the most expensive battery is still good value for money for me.
That's a great answer, David. I seeing no other hands, I have a question of my own, and that is, when I got my solar panels 8 years ago, they were about 15% efficient. Today, the efficiency of a manufactured solar panel might be something above 20% or 21 or 22%.
Yep.
The question is, should people wait to install solar power? Is there a technological breakthrough on the horizon, or should they just go ahead and install them now?
So in my opinion, you should do them now, because solar panels are dirt cheap. They've never been cheaper. So Paul mentioned efficiency. Efficiency has gone up from about 15% to about 22% today. That is not the biggest change. The biggest change is the cost. The price of solar panels has plummeted during that time. And that's why, despite reducing subsidies and increasing tariffs, it costs you less per kilowatt hour produced from a solar panel today than it did when I bought my panels 4 or 5 years ago. So solar panels produce dirt cheap power, and it might get a little cheaper. Maybe you get from 5 cents per kilowatt hour to 4 cents, but 5 cents is dirt cheap. It will save you so much money in the year or two you're waiting for that newer technology to come out, and you don't know how much that newer technology is going to cost. It's probably more than the current technology. So to my mind, today is the perfect situation. The costs have come down significantly. The subsidies are still very generous, especially in Eversource territory. It varies by territory, but in Eversource territory, the subsidies are very generous, especially if you get them with batteries. So I think now is the time to be doing it. I think it's unlikely to be a better financial deal in the future, even if the panels get better in the future.
Okay, Richard Wodehouse has a question. You're muted, Richard. Let's see.
Okay, sorry.
There you go.
I'm the one in California.
Hey, Richard.
Is it worth it to buy the more expensive sun power panels versus Chinese panels?
So I go into this in a lot of detail in the book, Richard. So you'll get the free book at the end of this. So you may want to download and read the chapter on solar panels. But the way I made the decision was I first screened out companies I'd never heard of. And the reason I screened out companies I've never heard of is not because I inherently don't trust them, is because I thought there was a risk they wouldn't be around in 25 years to honor the warranty. These are long-term purchase decisions. You need to have a 10-year, 15-year, 20-year life of the solar panels to make good money off your investment. So I wanted to know that the manufacturer was going to stand by the warranty for 25 years. So I did not even consider companies I'd never heard of. And the only companies I considered back then, this is like 4 or 5 years ago, was SunPower, I think Panasonic, there were a couple of others. This is all in the book. And these days, LG was the other one, because there was a French company that's a very big company. It's got a big building products business. So I knew they'd be around to honor the warranty in 20 years' time. So I only looked at big, well-known companies. I didn't look at the Taiwanese manufacturers or the Chinese manufacturers that are cheap, but I don't want to be buying a cheap panel that is going to break and I can't get fixed in the future. So I looked firstly only at the companies I thought had the staying power to honor the warranty. And these days, I would say in that category would be SunPower, Panasonic, LG, Solaria, and REC. Those are probably the 4 or 5, which I think are the big ones with the staying power to be there and honor the warranty. Within those, I then looked at the lowest cost per kilowatt hour over the lifetime of the warranty period, which is almost always 25 years these days. It used to be 15 or 20 years, but now they've all migrated to the 25-year warranty. And I use that in the financial calculations, which I did myself because I'm comfortable doing these calculations on a spreadsheet. But if you're not comfortable doing it, then just use the Energy Sage website. And that's how I made the calculations. But my first screen was, is this a big, reliable company that's going to be around for 25 years? And I just ignored all the companies below that. I didn't think it was worth going for a cheaper panel if the company wasn't going to be around to repair it.
That makes sense. Okay.
Thank you, David. I think you've done a marvelous job of retaining our audience for a very long time. I think it's time now to let people have the password or the code or whatever they need to download the book, and
yeah.
I'll let you take it from there.
Let me get there. So I was going to talk a little bit about putting all the Fab 4 together, but we actually talked about this early on in the presentation, because when you combine those solar panels with dirt cheap electricity, which also has a zero carbon footprint, and you use that to power your heat pump, you're not only generating heat in your house at half the cost of natural gas, but you're doing it with a zero carbon footprint. And this is sort of the magic combination. And if you, in addition, cut the load on your house, the heating on your house, by having insulation and triple glazed windows, you can get the load on your house down, so that if you heat efficiently using a heat pump, you can now generate all of that electricity from solar panels on your roof. And that is kind of the magic combination we finally got to after years and years of the technology getting better and better. We've finally got to that point where if you do all these things, put it all together like I talk about here, then you can get to a zero carbon footprint and zero bills. So that's what these graphs showed, is the cost per kilowatt hour of heat in the house, the cost of using a solar power to run a heat pump. The cheapest way to heat your house now is to use solar panels running a heat pump. It is no longer to heat your house with natural gas. This is a massive change in the cost of heating your house. Now, the same thing is true for driving your car, by the way. I bought a Tesla about a year ago. It cost me 2 cents per mile to drive my Tesla when it's charged from solar panels on my roof. It costs me 15 cents a mile to drive my SUV. It's like no comparison. My wife recently drove the 400 miles there and back to New York City. It cost $8 driving the Tesla, $8. Do you know what the Greyhound costs? 25. 25 bucks to catch the Greyhound, and that emits carbon dioxide and pollution all the way. The Tesla was a beautiful drive, and it cost $8 and no carbon dioxide and no pollution. So this is why it's a new era. This is why we're not just talking about interesting things to do in your house. This is why it's game over for natural gas and heating oil and propane as fuels to heat your house. They're just too expensive compared to some.
Yeah, and I just want to take this opportunity to thank you again, David. This was really helpful, really informative. We appreciate everything you're doing and sharing this great information. I'm just wondering, like, people can hang around here as long as they want to ask questions. For some of us, for some of us, it's a school night.
Yeah, of course. So anyone who wants to go, please go. I don't want to keep.
And how do we get the link?
Hang on, sorry, yes, sorry. Let me get that. I was taking too long. So this. So all you got to do is go to my website, greenzerocarbonhome.com. Cheryl, if you could just put that into the chat so everyone has it.
Okay.
You don't have to, like, misspell it or anything. If you go to Google and just search for Zero Carbon Home, you'll also find my website.
So www.greenzerocarbonhome.com.
That's it. Yep. And order the book, the ebook. It comes from Kindle or for iPad, whichever you want. And type in the code ZCSSC, which is Zero Carbon Sustainable Sharon Coalition, ZCSSC, and it'll be free. And you can just download it, either for iPad or Kindle, whichever one you want. Now, I just warn you, occasionally this does not work. And I can't figure out why, something to do with browser compatibility. But if it doesn't work, email me. My email address is here, dgreen@greenzerocarbon.com. So if it doesn't work, email me and I can email you the Kindle file or I can email you the iPad file if it doesn't work as a download from the website.
Hopefully I typed it in correctly. It won't let me select it, but hopefully that looks good. ZCSSC.
That's it, ZCSSC, yeah.
Wonderful. And thank you again. We will applaud you virtually. and thanks so much. And come to our meetings anytime.
Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you, Paul. And good night, everyone.
Don Pulaski had one more question.
Okay, I'll stay on. If anyone wants to stay on and ask questions, I will stay on.
Thank you. Don?
Thanks. I wanted to ask about the interior window. Does it have to have two panes so it has a layer of air trapped, or can you trap the air just by putting the interior window on?
So when you add this interior window, fit from the inside window, it has either a foam strip around the outside or a rubber gasket around the outside, and you just push fit it. It's just held in by friction into the reveals around the window frame. And that adds one pane of glass or one pane of plastic, but adds an air gap to your window. So if your window is currently a single glazed window, like the ones I showed you, those double hung windows with the very old divided lights, the small small panes in the panel, you're adding a pane of glass. You're adding one air gap. So you're taking a single glazed window and making it into a double glazed window. If you've got double glazed already, double glazed sash windows or double glazed casement windows, you're taking two panes and adding a third. So you're making a double glazed window into a triple glazed window. Now, one other thing I just mentioned is these windows greatly cut down on drafts. They add insulation because you've got the extra air gap, you've got the low E coatings if you buy the glass one. But they also greatly reduce drafts. And one of the big problems with sash windows, double hung or single hung sash windows that move up and down like this, is they're almost impossible to seal the drafts. They're almost always leaky. If the house moves a little bit, you get cracks in the windows and air just comes through them. So so these fit from the inside windows do a great job if you've got older leaky windows. Maybe they're not old enough that you want to replace them, or you don't have the money to replace them right now. But these fit from the inside windows do a great job of blocking the drafts and adding insulation. They also block noise as well, by the way. So if you've got noisy neighbors or noisy street, they're great at blocking noise. And for $200 each, I think they're really good value for money.
Okay, anybody else have any questions?
Yeah, David, I have another question for you.
Yeah.
So just curious. So my original array, each solar panel is 235 watts. My second array is 330 watts per panel. What's the common wattage now?
360 or 370.
Is that much now? Okay.
Are there any services that do that infrared, you know, come to your house with an infrared camera in winter and detect where the heat is escaping?
Yeah, so almost every insulation contractor, and the best insulation contractors you can get through the Mass Save program. So go to the Mass Save website. You have to sign up to get their audit done first. They do these virtually these days. They used to visit your house. In fact, they used to visit your house and do infrared pictures, but now they don't because they do it all virtually because of COVID. But you have to do that audit to get things like the heat loan, which is a subsidized loan, a 0% interest loan for buying things like heat pumps. That is a huge subsidy, well worthwhile taking advantage of. But an alternative to that is most libraries actually have infrared cameras, and you can borrow it just like borrowing a book and just go around your house yourself. They're very easy to use. You can immediately tell where the leaks are and the cold air is. So that's another great way of doing it, is just to rent one from the library.
Super, that's a very good tip. Anyone else? We have a great opportunity.
Hey, David, question on batteries, David.
Yep.
So one of the things that's coming out is on batteries is the cobalt aspect. Is, you know, some places where you read like cobalt is like considered the blood diamond of batteries. So for example, a Sonnen battery is cobalt free. With a Tesla Powerwalls, it's basically nickel manganese cobalt. So clearly it's not cobalt free, I believe. I don't really know for a fact how much truth there is to that. I think there's truth because I read it in several places, but what's your take on that one?
I'm not actually familiar with the issue, Art, so I can't really give you an opinion on that. Most of these rare earth minerals are mined in oddball places around the world. There's a lot is mined in China, and in fact, I was reading a story just today that some of these materials are now being the US is now placing sanctions on companies within China that are using forced labor in the internment camps in Xinjiang. And so you're starting to hear more and more about this kind of stuff, where these rare earth materials like cobalt and molybdenum and selenium and things like that, they often have bad stories with them. So I don't know enough to have an opinion about it, Art, but I do think this is a topic that is going to become more and more common for any of these products that have rare earths in them. And semiconductors is one, batteries are another.
Just one last question, because I'm really interested in understanding some of the payback as far as how you're doing some of the math on the window part. Are you simply taking the R value differential between double and triple, and then looking at the square area of your windows and what the heat loss is? Is that how you factored your dollar savings?
That's exactly right. So Art obviously knows what he's talking about here. So there is a formula for calculating the rate of heat loss across a window or across a wall or anything. It's a very simple formula, and all you need to know is the R value or the U value of the window, plus the temperature difference between the inside and the outside, and the area. That's it. That's all you need to know. You can calculate how much heat is lost. From that, you can very easily translate that. Suppose it's 1,000 BTUs per day. You can easily calculate what it costs you to replace that 1,000 BTUs with whatever fuel you've got, natural gas or heating oil. So that's exactly how I did it. I calculated the rate of heat loss, the change, and the change in the heat loss is because I put that window insert in there. I did not take the manufacturer's specs at face value. I measured it myself. You can measure the R value just using the temperature differences. So I measured it myself, and you see the infrared pictures I took. That was upstairs at my rental property. I did I did it 5 times to make sure I didn't have any errors in it. I took the window out, put it back in, let it equilibrate, took the temperature readings, measured the R value myself. And I found that the R values, actually, they weren't too bad. They were fairly close to what the manufacturers claimed.
That's good. That's good. Hey, Dave, do you have an inductive cooktop at your house?
I do. I do.
Okay.
It was well, I had one before. Cheryl showed us how wonderful cooktops are in the Sustainable Sharon Coalition webinar we had a few weeks ago. But I'm a big fan of them.
Yeah.
So they're great. The biggest benefit to me is the pans don't get burnt food on them. It's having just a glass cooktop is great. You just wipe it down. I mean, trying to clean an old ring burner, it's almost impossible. We had one. We had one for 20 years, and I was not sorry to see it go. But I would never go back to electric ring burner cooking. And I was brought up on gas. My mum cooked every meal I ate with natural gas, and I wouldn't even go back to natural gas. Induction is so much better than even natural gas. And the one big disadvantage of induction historically has been they've been expensive. Induction ovens have been kind of monopolized by the high-end kitchen gadget makers like I don't know, Miele and what's the other big one? Viking. People like that make the big stainless steel ones. But what I found out is you can go to Walmart and buy a little plug-in one. Just plugs in
For the countertop.
for like $200.
Yeah.
It's like they are dirt cheap. In fact, they're much cheaper than buying a new stovetop. And you can, for $200, you can get a 2-ring induction stove. If you want to try it out, try it out this way. Don't spend thousands of dollars for a Viking stove. But they're now dirt cheap, and they're so much better than gas or ring burner electric.
Hey, Dave, you know about the Mothers Out Front campaign about frack gas and studies of gas cooking and so forth, correct? You know that campaign going on?
I'm not familiar with the campaign, but I do know I'm a biotech guy by trade. I kind of got into the zero carbon stuff after I retired after a nasty road accident. But sorry, I lost my train of thought there. What were we talking about?
Frack gas and the
gas, right? And so I read things like the New England Journal of Medicine. I read the medical journals because of my biotech background. And the New England Journal of Medicine recently came out with a editorial that was the strongest editorial I've ever heard them say, and it was natural gas appliances should be banned in new construction.
Wow.
This is a health journal. It's nothing to do with the carbon footprint. It's nothing to do with saving money. It's because burning stuff in your kitchen creates soot.
Wow.
Soot causes asthma.
Yep.
And I in all the years I've read the New England Journal of Medicine, I've never heard them say this should be removed from the market.
That's incredible. That's absolutely incredible. Yeah, the Mothers Out Front, actually, Paul just shared a video from Mothers Out Front, very specifically talking about the frack or gas, quote, natural gas, clean energy, which is not frack gas, institute cooktops, asthma, and everything related to the health hazards of this natural gas, which we've been led to believe for for time in memoriam that it's clean and healthy and so forth, when it's not.
Yeah, let me just zip back. I want to show you one slide. So this slide I didn't get to talk about today, but at the top you see the death rate on the left from accidents and air pollution, and the greenhouse gas emissions on the right.
Don't see it. Can you put it up?
I saw what was just coming across, Paul.
Can you see a graph bar chart?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I see it says what are the safest and cleanest sources of energy. I see it myself.
It says coal, oil, natural gas.
Yeah.
Oh, I see it now. I'm sorry.
Okay. Probably just a slow internet connection. But anyway, you can see at the top. On the left is the death rate from accidents and air pollution. On the right is the greenhouse gas emissions. The bottom 4 are hydropower, nuclear, wind, and solar. They have negligible death rates from either air pollution or industrial accidents, and negligible greenhouse gas emissions. When you put the health benefits alongside the global warming benefits, it's as clear as day.
Where did this come from, David? I'm trying to look at the reference.
Ourworldindata.org.
Oh yeah, they've got a lot of COVID data on that site too.
It's from an academic publication. It's not like I just made this up.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
You can see, you can read it. So Art, if you're interested, all these slides are on my website. You can download a PDF file of all of them if you want to go and check it out. But I'm hearing this stuff more and more and more. During the COVID lockdown in the UK, 2 million people reported better lung function because this wasn't the pollution in the air we've had in the past. Nothing to do with global warming, to do with pollution. You see it here on the death rates from industrial accidents and from pollution. You hear it from the New England Journal of Medicine. Gas appliances should be banned from homes.
Wow.
I mean, everywhere you look, we're starting to see. Oh, so locally, Springfield, Massachusetts, is the asthma capital of the United States. Did you know that?
No.
That has something to do with biomass, I think.
They have a couple of incinerator plants there, and it's in a bowl at the bottom of the Berkshire Mountains. So they've got everything is going bad for them.
Wow.
But it's partly because we burn heating oil here. We don't, or natural gas. We have a lot of heating oil here, and Springfield is the capital of the United States for asthma, the highest rates of asthma in the United States.
Wow.
And here we are in Massachusetts. We've got this very clean economy full of biotech and fintech and tech, and yet we have the asthma capital of the United States. So over and over again, I keep running into the health consequences. I told you I'm a biotech guy. If zero carbon was a drug, it would get instant approval from the FDA because it has widespread health benefits, widespread and substantial health benefits, and zero side effects.
Hey, David, I have one more question about solar.
Go ahead.
Again, you said you calculated how much it costs per watt. Do I just simply take the formula, how much I produce times how much I paid? Is that how you do the calculation?
Close. So I was talking about how much it costs per kilowatt hour, not per kilowatt.
Okay.
So per kilowatt is usually the rated power of the panels. So a typical panel is 360 watts. A typical array might be 5 or 10 or 15 kilowatts.
Okay. So what's the formula?
So an average array in Massachusetts will produce about 1,000 kilowatt hours per year for every kilowatt of installed power. So if you've got a 10 kilowatt array, it's going to produce about 10,000 kilowatt hours per year.
Right.
That's guaranteed for 25 years. So 10,000 kilowatt hours a year times 25, 250,000 kilowatt hours over the lifetime of the panels. Now, if it costs you, I'm losing track here. If it costs you $25,000 net, that would be 10 cents per kilowatt hour.
Okay.
$25,000 net over 250,000 kilowatt hours, that's 10 cents per kilowatt hour. Now, the real numbers for my array was about 14,000, and it's probably producing more kilowatt hours than that. It's probably producing 300,000 kilowatt hours over a 25-year period. So my cost per kilowatt hour is only about 5 cents. But that's how I did the calculations.
Do you have the calculation in your book?
The answers are in the book. I'm not sure the methodology is in the book. I think I probably talk it through, but I don't think I give an example.
David, you talking about the levelized cost of energy?
It's kind of a levelized cost of energy. Yeah. So if you're stuck on this, send me an email and I can explain it for you.
Okay, thank you.
I got a situation in my house, David. I have a full basement, unfinished. It's always cool down there in the summer, and I have an air duct system, forced hot air. And it always occurred to me, why can't I pump the air out of my basement and circulate it through the house to cool the house? It might be cheaper than air conditioning. Do you know anyone done that?
Yeah, me. That's what I do. So I have air handlers in the basement, and just like you, my basement is cool. And so what I do is in the summertime, well, let's say about like maybe June, when it starts to get warm enough, we need air conditioning.
Yeah.
I go down to the basement and I remove the cover where the filter goes. We have big box filters that just filter the particles out of the air. Yeah. I take the filter out and then lean it up against the slot. So there's still some filtration, but now that slot is sucking air out of the basement and circulating around the house. And that prevents me from putting the air conditioning system on for about 4 weeks.
Wow. That's a great.
It saves me money. It's free. I'm
Yeah.
using that cool air stored up in the basement. I just make sure it's circulated around the house. And my air in the basement is dehumidified. This is an important caveat because I have a heat pump hot water tank. Heat pump hot water tanks dehumidify the air. If you did this without dehumidifying the air, you might get some condensation elsewhere in the house, which is not great. So that's why all these things kind of work together. If you put a heat pump hot water tank in, which is dirt cheap, very high efficiency, about 4 times the efficiency of a furnace, compared to only 2.5 times for an external air source heat pump. So very, very efficient. It cools your basement down a little bit, which is why you need the insulation on the ceiling of your basement, so you're not just cooling down your house. And it dehumidifies the air. So now I've got cool, dehumidified air in my basement in the summertime. Right, that's like perfect.
With a, did you say a water heater? What was it that does?
My water is heated by a heat pump hot water tank. So it looks exactly the same as a regular hot water tank. It's like a 5 feet tall, except mine is 6 feet tall because mine has a heat pump on top. That heat pump takes the heat out of the air in the basement and puts it into the hot water. And then the hot water for my taps and sinks and everything is all run off that hot water tank. But it is very, very efficient. And it costs me peanuts to heat my hot water, whereas before it was heated by the oil furnace coming on to burn heating oil to heat the water is terribly inefficient because every time the hot water goes down, the furnace comes on, and if the heating system's not on, the furnace is cold. So it spends 10 minutes warming up the block and then shuts itself off, and all that heat is just in my basement. So using a natural gas or even an oil fire or a natural gas furnace to heat water with an indirect water heater is really pretty inefficient. And heat pump water tanks are very inefficient and very cheap. You can buy them at Home Depot for like $1,300. You can get a Rheem heat pump water tank. Rheem's a good manufacturer for like $1,300. Pay your electrician and your plumber to install it, probably about $500. So for $1,800, and that's before the Mass Save rebate. Mass Save has a $600 rebate, so now that $1,500 is $900. It's probably going to save you $200 a year, $300 a year. So it's going to pay for itself in like 3 or 4 years. And on top of all that, you can get a heat loan, 0 interest loan to pay for it. like the subsidies are so good on these things. This is why you really have to understand the technologies and how to fit them together. But then you got to get the subsidies. The subsidies for solar panels, for heat pumps, they're so good. And even batteries, you can really reduce the cost to you to the point where this makes very, very good financial sense.
Yeah, of course, those subsidies are not going to last forever, are they?
I'm sorry?
Those subsidies are not going to last forever. They'll be phased out over time.
Yeah, that's why I think now is the time to go and do this stuff, because even though the technologies will get better, there's no doubt they're going to get better. Right now, we've got this magic combination where the technologies are good enough and the subsidies are still great. So financially, this is about the optimal time to be doing it. There may come a time in the future when you get better technology, but right now it's dirt cheap. So now is the time to do it.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone has a hot water heater, which is approaching the end of their life, gas or oil, definitely get rid of it fairly soon and put a hybrid in. If anyone has a straight electric hot water heater, I mean, I suppose don't do it if it's brand new, but if anyone has a straight resistance electric hot water heater, get rid of it and put in the hybrid, because the cost will be, I don't know, 30% the cost of a straight electric or something like that.
Yeah.
When you say hybrid, you're talking about a heat pump.
Heat pump, yeah, they're considered hybrids. Yes,
they call them hybrids in the trade because they have the heat pump on top, but they always have a backup electrical heating element just in case. I don't think it's ever come on with my heat pump hot water tank. They're so good, you never have to use it, but it's there in case. So they call them hybrids, but they really are heat pump hot water tanks.
Did somebody else start talking? Did I interrupt somebody? I apologize if I did. Well, it sounds like we've run out of questions. It's been a fantastic evening. 9 o'clock now, a little after. So we've packed an awful lot of information into a short time. That actually brings up one other thing. I presume you do these presentations from time to time. So we go to your website, like there was so much information here, you can't absorb it all.
Yeah.
And if you listen to another presentation, maybe more of it would soak in,
Yeah, so I've got about 3 or 4 coming up over the next month or two. So if you just go to my website, on the home page, there's a list of like the next 4. You can just click on the link and register for the next one, and then you'll get sent the email saying it's starting soon.
Yeah, Artie, we're on the subcommittee for energy for SSC. Maybe we should put a link to David's website and encourage people to tune into the next one,
Yeah, that makes some sense. Hey, David, isn't the next one the League of Women Voters one in the
Yes.
Westwood area?
Yes, it is, yeah. Yeah, that is,
okay.
yeah. That's the next one, and then there's one after that for Arlington. There's one after that for somebody else.
Okay. Well, we can do that. Yeah, we'll put that on the energy page.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, we'll throw it up there. Yeah, it makes sense.
Well, I'm run out of questions. I'm sure I'll think of some more as soon as I leave this session. Why didn't I ask him that? But
That's just quite all right. I'm happy to answer questions. You've got my email address. You can either send me an email or register for the next one, and then we can have the same kind of live Q&A, which I find is, the Q&A from the chat box, you get short questions, but this is more like a conversation where maybe you've got to explore something a bit, or Art's got an idea. You can get a conversation about a topic that's more valuable, I think, than just answering straight questions.
I'm going to put Charlotte Patotsky on the hot seat here. Charlotte, you've listened to a lot of this. You're a smart young lady. I wonder if you have any questions, as your generation is the one that's going to be the most impacted by climate change. I'm old, I've got it made, but your generation is a high school senior, is it, or junior now? Can you hear me, Charlotte? I guess you have to unmute, right? I just wanted to hear from the next generation. Do you have any questions, Charlotte? Maybe she moved away from her computer, I guess. I thought I'd give it a try. Anybody else,
If Charlotte's still listening, I just mentioned something, which is tomorrow morning, I'm actually teaching a class at Dover Sherburne High School in the environmental science elective, where we're going to be talking about exactly the same stuff. The homework assignment for the class tomorrow was to watch this webinar tonight. Not this one, like actually tonight, but watch it on YouTube. There's a recorded version of this webinar is on YouTube, and the homework assignment for all those students was to watch the webinar, and then tomorrow we're going to do an extended Q&A session like this.
How close is the one on YouTube resembling this one, David?
Very similar. The current generation has more health information in it than the previous one, because a lot of that information came out fairly recently, like the New England Journal of Medicine study, the COVID study in England. Those are more recent. But other than that, the core of it is the same. It's the same Fab4, the same financial analysis. It's just I've added stuff on health.
So for the League of Women Voters, when that one's going on, which will have the more health stuff, which I think is great and very beneficial, can that one be recorded?
Yeah, I can record everyone. This one has been recorded, and I will send the link tomorrow to Paul and Cheryl, and they can post it on the Sustainable Sharon website.
Okay.
Yep. Irina, you've hung in there for the whole evening, and you did have some good questions in the chat. Do you have any more questions?
No, but David, are you aware of New York City, or actually everywhere probably it's being implemented, the carbon tax?
I'm not actually aware of a New York City one.
Yeah, it's the local law 97.
Okay. I mean, I'm in favor of things that raise the price of carbon. We have 2 in the United States. One is in California, where they have it's really more like a carbon price than a carbon tax. And then we have one in New England too. The New England states have the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which puts a cost of emitting carbon onto electricity generators. So it only applies to electricity right now. But I think in the climate bill that Governor Baker vetoed and is now probably going to get either overridden or it'll be negotiated between the House and the governor. I think there's a provision in there to extend the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative to transportation fuel and impose a similar kind of cost on distributors, wholesalers of gasoline and diesel, which will then raise the price at the retail level and probably fund things like the Mass Save program, because that's what happens with the money from the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. So I think all these things that raise the cost of carbon eventually lead people to make rational decisions. And one of the reasons we're here tonight is because the cost of electricity in Massachusetts is 23 cents per kilowatt hour. That is the highest in the nation other than Hawaii. And part of the reason is because the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. It pushes up the price of electricity, and that is what makes it more cost effective to use solar power here, because the cost of electricity is so high. You're saving 23 cents every time you produce a kilowatt hour.
Well, this is more of a penalization of buildings for emitting carbon.
Ah, okay, I wasn't aware of
So
that.
it's a penalty placed on every building that is over 25,000 square feet, but it actually doesn't take effect until 2024. It was put into law in 2019, but again, it's based on the building owners needing to benchmark their buildings for electrical use, and then they reduce their carbon emissions, I guess, with upgrades. Now, my other question would be, I am not for all electric, especially where it affects the body. And I just wanted to know if you came across any research on how electric cars could affect health and EMF and EMR emissions. And so therefore, I do not believe that we are there yet on this level of technology that I still believe is a bit worrisome for sure. But unfortunately, I also read another article, I think, where they mentioned that electricity is not necessarily the most efficient with cars because of the way they calculate it. And forgive me because I'm not able to explain this, but I can share an article with you that will explain that to you. And then you can maybe direct that on the next webinar. It was said that we're all misunderstanding how efficient electricity is for car.
So let me there's a lot of points there. Let me just comment on a couple of them.
Yeah.
So I've not read any journal articles on electric vehicle emissions and health. Like emissions, not as in pollution emissions, but like electrical force, EMF type emissions. And I suspect, and this is just being the physicist in me, I suspect there won't be any, because any damaging radiation that's electrical in origin is AC. It's alternating current. It has to be a waveform to cause any kind of damage to the human body or anything. Whereas electric vehicles are DC. The direct current is a battery. So, I mean, I've never heard of anyone getting...
No, it's exactly the opposite. It's electricity that impacts the health versus electromagnetism that doesn't.
Okay, you know more than I do, I'm afraid. I don't.
I'm not a physicist, but I know what I've read. And apparently our body is electric. Our body is acting like a battery. And it is solely because we have meridians and chakras all through our system. And this is why certain times when we do have electricity, we are affected, you know. And so there are places that have things to purchase now, whether they work or they don't work, but they actually harmonize, like if they can harmonize the negative effect of the electric current.
Okay, so it sounds like there is a solution then.
Well, there could be a solution. However, you know, like I said, it's based on, you know, which manufacturers are actually solving it, right? If you come across this science, and I'll give you this link, you can all research it. It's called biogeometry. And biogeometry is basically a science where they harmonize the detrimental effects of electric smog. And they've been doing this for the last 40 years. And I know I'm very good with Dr. Kareem, who's the inventor of it. And he actually, you know, has tons of books out there, but I would recommend maybe you look at it and understand a little bit also about the EMF harm in the EV, you know, of course, the electric vehicles, and of course the cell towers, and we're facing, of course, 5G, which isn't something that everybody is looking forward to. But again, there are ways to harmonize that.
Okay, that's great. These are not areas I'm familiar with. I try to stick to what I'm.
Yeah, no, I'm just bringing it up because it's an open
Yeah.
topic of conversation on the EMF and EMR. And I know that's been around. So basically, because if we are all going electric, I think that our smart buildings need to be designed better. And I'm an architect, so I really believe that we have no idea yet about how all this is impacting, you know, our health.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Those are interesting comments, as you point out, Irina. The fact that we're transitioning, making a radical transition now could, you know, have unintended consequences
Yes.
with respect to health and the environment too. I mean, we take it as sort of an assumption that if we make this change, there aren't going to be any problems. And actually, David did show that graph, which showed much less health consequence, along with much less environmental consequence of these various clean energy sources. And really, we have to ask the question also, if they're not perfect, maybe they're still a lot better than burning fossil fuel, but still, these are legitimate concerns that need to be, the questions need to be asked and answered.
And the other thing that I wanted to ask was, oh my God, I blanked out. I was going to say something and then I lost it as we were talking, but it'll come to me. It's okay.
Well, I looked, I'm already reading about the biogeometric integration or harmonization.
Biogeometry.
Yeah,
yes.
biogeometry harmonization. As we're sitting here, I'm reading about it right now. So
yeah, it's actually something that I was trained in. And, you know, of course, I don't want to be a practitioner of it, but I am very versed in knowing how to use it for my design. And this is something that I think is going to be more and more around.
These are architectural designs you're talking about?
Yeah, I have, architectural design. So any home can be designed basically by shapes, right? And if as an architect, you know, typically like architects will talk about the beauty and the aesthetics of it, but what this is you can actually measure the centering quality of shapes, and that will allow you to position the home or do, you know, certain things that actually would enhance the same natural qualities that are found in nature into the home and into the building. And this can be done with existing buildings, or it can be done with new construction or new designs. And so I'm very much into understanding, you know, the carbon, I just thought of what it was I wanted to say, the carbon statistics of where all this research is coming from that is saying how detrimental carbon is to our Earth. Now, what happened with other sources of pollution, like the California fires? You know, are those things that are happening around us even more, and we're sort of allowing it to be sort of the carbon problem, right? But yet in nature, carbon is not the enemy. So we're sort of, you know, I don't know, I'm still fresh on understanding what the carbon problem is right now, and I need excellent sources to say, you know, this is what has been measured, this is where we're at. You know, what stage of the sustainability are we all at? Right? What we've been around for 50 years now doing sustainability. How much have we shifted? 1 degree, 2 degrees, 0 degrees? You know, and we're going now to an electric world, right? I mean, until the fossil fuel gets completely eliminated, I don't see any of this happening. And it's not going to happen until 2030, maybe 2040. I mean, we're supposed to be 2050 in New York by 2050 net zero. And 2050 from now until then is a while. So it just doesn't make sense anymore that we're still adamant about having fossil fuels and using these coal productions. You know, it's just, if we're all going to go into electric, then there's one avenue. But if we are understanding that it has to stop, it has to wean off versus it continuing until we get to carbon neutral, and it just, I don't see the problem going away.
You know, Irina, you mentioned carbon, and I wanted to ask David a question about something called graphene.
Oh,
I
yes.
got something recently where apparently graphene is some kind of a carbon-based substance that can be used to make films, maybe solar panels or something, but it'll also be like a sequestering of carbon. Do you know anything about that, David?
Well, graphene is just a form of carbon in the same way graphite, like pencil lead, like this pencil I've got right now. The pencil lead is not lead; it's actually it's graphite, and diamond is just a different form of carbon, and graphene is just a different form of carbon. It's one in which the planes of the atoms are all lined up, so they can slip very easily across each other. That's what makes graphene so special, and you can make incredibly thin films out of it. There's been a lot of buzz around graphene for probably 10 years now, and carbon nanotubes kind of came out of graphene, but I still don't have any real practical applications of it. It's been promising for a while now, and I suspect it's going to be promising for a while.
Yeah.
So if you have any other questions related to what I mentioned, you can feel free to call me. I know you and I probably corresponded on some other things before in the past, but you know, you're more than welcome to call me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we should wrap it up, Paul. It's almost 9:30.
Well, it's been great. Thanks for making yourself available for this fascinating conversation, David. It really has been great, and we've all learned a lot. And we all, I think, from speaking for myself, what I really learned was how much more I have to learn. Oh, that's why I think I'll try to tune into another one of these sessions, and maybe more of it'll soak into the thick skull, you know.
Just a quick question. The other two webinars, the March 8th, I think it is, or 25th, are those going to be the same as this one, or is it on a different topic?
No, it's the same topic and the same presentation. Of course, the questions and answers will be different, but the bit that I'm going to talk about, what I'm speaking, will be very similar to tonight.
Okay.
So Paul, when you get the recording tomorrow or the next day, let's upload it to YouTube, some YouTube channel, and then I'll put the link on the website.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll do that. All right.
Okay.
All right.
Well,
good night, guys. Good night, Irina.
Take care, David.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night. That was excellent.